On a bright Friday afternoon in downtown Springfield, people moved quickly along the wide sidewalks. Cars honked softly in the distance, the warm sun made the pavement glow, and the air carried a faint smell of fresh coffee from a nearby cafe. At the corner of Elm and 5th, Officer Mark Dalton stood beside his patrol car, checking a report on his clipboard. He wore his crisp blue uniform and polished badge, and his face looked calm but focused. Across the street, Aisha Clark, a young community organizer, walked toward her car after finishing a meeting. She carried a small stack of flyers and wore a bright scarf that fluttered in the breeze. Aisha loved that scarf because it reminded her of hope and strength. She believed in speaking up for those who had no voice. Today, she had met with several neighbors to discuss plans for a neighborhood garden. She spoke with clear, gentle words, and people listened. With her meeting done, she felt proud and ready to head home. She crossed the street and paused by her parked car, enjoying the light chatter of pedestrians and the distant ring of bicycle bells. Then Officer Dalton stepped forward and raised his hand. Aisha paused, puzzled. The officer walked toward her with a serious expression. "Mom, can I see your driver's license and registration?" he asked, his voice steady. Aisha felt a small knot in her stomach. She reached inside her purse, found her license and the car papers, and handed them to him without a word. She had done nothing wrong, but she knew it was best to be polite. Dalton flipped through the papers and frowned. He looked at Aisha up and down, then tapped the license again. "You know why I stopped you?" he asked, his tone growing firmer. Aisha shook her head. "No, officer. Was I not parked correctly?" she asked softly. She kept her hands where he could see them, and she spoke calmly, hoping to ease any tension. Dalton's eyes narrowed. He glanced around, as if he expected someone else to confirm his concerns. People on the sidewalk slowed their steps, looking over curiously. Aisha noticed their curious glances and felt her heartbeat quicken. "You were speeding back there," he said, pointing down the street. "I clocked you on radar." Aisha frowned. She had driven carefully from her meeting. "I don't think so," she replied. "I was at the speed limit the whole time." The officer's face hardened. He stepped closer, reducing the small space between them. Aisha felt uneasy. She took a small step back. "Please check the camera," she said gently. "I'm sure I kept it 50. By now, a few bystanders had paused to watch. A mother with a stroller, a delivery man on a bicycle, and an elderly man feeding birds on a bench all looked toward the scene. Officer Dalton sighed and turned away for a moment. He tapped his radio, spoke a few words, then returned his attention to Aisha. "Stand by the car," he ordered. His voice was calm but low. Without warning, he reached out and grabbed her arm. Aisha's heart skipped a beat. She felt a sharp tug as he yanked her toward his patrol car. "Please let go," she said, her voice steady but edged with alarm. She tried to step back, but Dalton's grip tightened. In that instant, he shoved her forward. Aisha stumbled and lost her balance. One moment she was upright, the next, her face hurtled toward the hard concrete. The sound of her head striking the pavement echoed in her ears. Time seemed to slow. She felt a wave of heat rush across her face as pain shot through her cheek. A hush fell over the small group of onlookers. The mother froze with her stroller. The delivery man skidded to a halt, and the elderly man gasped and dropped the birdseed he held. Aisha lay on the ground, stunned, her vision blurred, and for a moment, she saw nothing but bright sunlight. Then she heard whispers of shock and hurried footsteps as people rushed closer. Officer Dalton stood above her, breathing heavily. His face showed no regret. He reached down and attempted to pull her up by her arm. Aisha winced but managed to sit up, pressing her hand against her cheek. Her palm came away damp with blood. She blinked rapidly, trying to clear the tears forming in her eyes. "Why did you do that?" she asked, her voice trembling but clear enough for nearby onlookers to hear. A whisper spread through the crowd. "She didn't do anything. He hit her so hard." "Did you see her face?" Someone pulled out a phone and held it up, recording. The video captured Dalton's harsh movement and Aisha's startled fall. Aisha felt a rush of fear and anger. She curled up and covered her face with her hands, afraid to look. Then a strong woman's voice called out, "Officer, call an ambulance." A man with a medical bag knelt beside Aisha, checking her pulse and examining her for injuries. Dalton knelt too, but not to help. He reached for his radio and spoke quietly into it. "I need backup at Elm and 5th. Domestic disturbance, possible assault, suspect resisting arrest." His words rang out oddly given the scene. The bystanders shook their heads, some shouting, "She's not the suspect." The officer paused and looked around, as if surprised by the crowd's reaction. He pocketed his radio and stood up, leaving Aisha's side. Within minutes, the street corner felt crowded. A paramedic's ambulance pulled up, lights flashing but silent. Two paramedics jumped out, eased Aisha onto a stretcher, and lifted her carefully. She closed her eyes as they secured her, feeling all the world spin around her head. Someone handed her a water bottle, but she could not hold it. She felt dizzy and scared. As the ambulance doors closed, Aisha caught sight of the small group of witnesses. Their faces reflected shock and concern. One young man held his phone steady. The mother clutched her child protectively. The elderly man held the birdseed sachet like a lifeline. Aisha tried to smile to reassure them, but her lips quivered, and she glared at Officer Dalton. He watched as the ambulance drove away, then turned and walked back to his patrol car. Before climbing in, Dalton removed his gloves and placed them in a small plastic bag. He checked his uniform for any sign of blood or torn fabric. His eyes darted over to the crowd one last time. Then he sat down, closed the car door, and started typing notes on his computer. His screen blinked as he wrote, "Subject resisted. Arrest. Force used to gain compliance." He paused, then typed a few more words. "No injuries reported by subject." He hit send across the street. Whispers of outrage began to gather like storm clouds. Someone posted the video to social media with the caption, "Justice for Aisha. Cop slams her face to the ground for no reason." Within minutes, the video started to spread. Each view, each share, added to the rumble of anger. Comments poured in. "How could he treat her that way? Where is the body camera footage? We need answers." Inside the police station, an officer received the radio call and alerted the control room about the incident. They looked for body cam footage that should have recorded the traffic stop, but the camera's feed went dark for a crucial 15 seconds right before the shove. The control room operator frowned at the blank screen and tapped a few keys. No signal. He muttered, "Must have been a glitch." Meanwhile, social media exploded with calls for an investigation. By the time evening fell, the story had reached every corner of Springfield. The local news station ran the video on their 6 o'clock broadcast. Aisha's name, her face, and the moment she hit the pavement were on every screen. The newsroom invited a legal expert to discuss use of force rules. A civil rights lawyer showed photos of Aisha's bruises. The police department released a brief statement thanking witnesses for their cooperation and promising a full review, but they made no apology. Back at the corner of Elm and 5th, yellow police tape fluttered. In the wind, a lone white rose lay on the pavement where Aisha had fallen. The rose had no name attached, but it spoke of sorrow and sympathy. The small crowd that formed there talked softly, remembering her brave question from the ground. "Sir, why are you doing this?" That question, so simple and direct, began to echo in people's minds long after the sun set. It set the stage for the next day, when Aisha, her face bruised, but her spirit unbroken, would find her voice again. The ambulance arrived within minutes. Its red and white stripes glowed under the streetlights. Paramedics jumped out, carrying their medical bag and bright lights. One paramedic knelt beside Aisha. The other gathered supplies. They spoke to each other in calm voices. Aisha lay on the stretcher, her cheek throbbing and her mind spinning. She blinked slowly, trying to focus. The paramedic gently lifted her head to examine her injuries. He pressed a cold pad to the bruised area above her eyebrow. Aisha breathed in deeply, tasting the antiseptic smell. Her heart pounded, but she remained still. She remembered to breathe slowly, one breath at a time. Across the street, Officer Dalton watched from his patrol car. He sat with his back straight and his uniform neat. He waited for the paramedics to finish their work. When they closed the ambulance doors, he followed them to the hospital in his patrol car. Inside the ambulance, Aisha felt a sharp pain each time the stretcher moved over a bump. The paramedic offered her water. She took a small sip and thanked him softly. She watched the city lights blur past the window. She wondered if people still talked about what had happened. She felt tired but also anxious. What would come next? At the hospital, Aisha was taken to the emergency room. The waiting area was quiet. A few late patients sat in plastic chairs. The fluorescent lights hummed softly. A nurse called Aisha's name and led her inside. The nurse spoke kindly and asked questions about her pain level and any allergies. Aisha answered clearly, though every word felt heavy. The nurse guided her onto a hospital bed and wrapped blankets around her. The doctor arrived with a clipboard and gentle eyes. He examined her face carefully, touching around the bruise and checking for fractures. Aisha winced but did not complain. The doctor ordered an X-ray to make sure the bones were intact. While the X-ray machine whirred, Aisha thought about the moment she fell. She remembered the shock of the pavement against her cheek, the taste of dirt and pain, the sudden hush among the people watching. She remembered how her own question had echoed, "Sir, why are you doing this?" She closed her eyes and pressed her hand to her heart, feeling the steady beat. She promised herself she would not stay silent. She knew she had to speak up, not just for herself, but for others who might face the same injustice. In the hallway, reporters gathered near the hospital entrance. Cameras and microphones pointed inside. A small crowd of neighbors and friends formed by the doors. Someone held a handwritten sign that read "Justice for Aisha." Another waved a flyer with her name and contact information for a lawyer. Faces glowed with concern and anger. Aisha saw her friend Maria, who rushed forward as soon as she recognized her. Maria's eyes were moist. She embraced Aisha gently and whispered, "I'm so sorry this happened to you." Aisha hugged her back, grateful for the support. The hospital staff released Aisha after an hour. Her X-rays showed no broken bones, only deep bruises and a mild concussion. The doctor advised rest and ice packs and warned her to see a specialist if she felt dizzy or worse. He gave her a written report of her injuries and a prescription for pain medication. Aisha tucked the papers into her purse and thanked him. She walked out with Maria on one side and her brother Jamal on the other. Jamal looked angry but controlled. He lit a cigarette and blew smoke into the night. "We will make sure they pay for this," he said softly. Aisha nodded. Though she did not want revenge, she wanted change. Back at the police station, Officer Dalton prepared his incident report. He sat at a desk under harsh fluorescent lights. The silence of the empty station felt heavy. He typed out his account of the traffic stop. He wrote that the suspect resisted arrest and that force was necessary to gain compliance. He claimed no injuries occurred to the suspect during the arrest. He reviewed the witness statements from officers who were not present at the shove. He left out any mention of bystander videos. He saved the report and sent it to his supervisor. He leaned back inside, as if relieved the paperwork was done. Meanwhile, social media roared. The video of Aisha's fall spread across platforms. It had thousands of views within the hour. People shared it with anger in their comments. "This could happen to anyone," one user wrote. "We need police reform now," another insisted. Journalists traced the video to the corner of Elm and Fifth. They confirmed the officer's name and details of the incident. News websites published the story, mixing the video with interviews from witnesses. Late-night talk shows discussed the case during their monologues. The hashtag Justice for Aisha trended on social media along with calls for an inquiry. That evening, community leaders organized a vigil at the site of the attack. Aisha, still wearing her scarf, arrived with Maria and Jamal. They found dozens of people gathered around a makeshift memorial. Flowers, candles, and handwritten notes covered the pavement. Some notes said, "We stand with you." Others read, "Stop police violence." A sense of unity filled the air. A gentle breeze carried the soft glow of candle flames. A local pastor spoke about peace and justice. He prayed for Aisha's recovery and for a fair investigation. The crowd listened in respectful silence, then joined hands and offered a moment of solidarity. Aisha stepped forward and spoke without a microphone. Her voice shook at first, but then grew steady. She thanked everyone for coming. She said she did not seek hate or revenge. She only wanted truth. She said her fall was more than a bruise. It was a reminder that power can be abused. She called for transparency and accountability in the police force. Her words flowed simply, reaching every person in the circle. Some wiped tears from their cheeks, others nodded, determined. When she finished, someone handed her a candle. She held it high, its light mixing with dozens of others. The vigil ended with a soft song led by a local choir. By night's end, the story had reached beyond Springfield. Advocates from other cities sent messages of support. Civil rights organizations offered legal help. A lawyer posted a public letter demanding the release of all body cam footage. The police chief made a brief statement promising a full internal review. He said the department took use of force seriously. Yet many questioned why the body camera had shut off. At the crucial moment, they demanded answers. The mayor's office scheduled a press conference for the next morning. At home, Aisha peeled off her makeup and applied ice packs to her bruises. She looked in the mirror and saw swelling under her eye. She felt tired but determined. She drank a cup of tea and rested on her couch. Maria sat nearby, scrolling through the latest news on her phone. Jamal cleaned up dishes in the kitchen, his face tense. Aisha closed her eyes and thought about the next day. She would speak again, this time with lawyers at her side. She would face reporters and city officials. She would ask the same question. Why did you do this? She felt fear, but she also felt hope. She knew that sometimes a single voice could make a difference. As midnight passed, the city grew quiet. Only distant sirens and hum of streetlights broke the silence. Aisha drifted into a restless sleep, her scarf still wrapped around her shoulders outside. The candles at the memorial flickered in the breeze, waiting for the dawn, and in the hearts of the people who watched her fall, a spark of change began to glow. 24 hours after she fell, Aisha woke before dawn. The first light of morning filtered through her curtains and touched the bruise under her eye, turning it a deep purple. She sat up slowly, rubbing the soreness in her cheek. Her phone lay on the nightstand, filled with messages of support and offers of help. Some friends sent kind words, civil rights groups offered legal advice, neighbors promised to stand with her. Aisha felt a swell of gratitude and a knot of nervousness. Today she would speak in public for the first time since the attack. She took a deep breath and reminded herself of her promise to speak clearly, calmly, and with conviction. She dressed in simple clothes, a white blouse and dark trousers. She wrapped her bright scarf around her neck as a symbol of hope. Maria waited in the living room, her eyes bright with concern. Jamal stood by the door, arms folded but proud. They drove together through the quiet streets toward City Hall. The city felt different now, as if it held its breath for what was to come. They passed the corner of Elm and Fifth, still marked by yellow tape and a lone white rose on the pavement. A small crowd clustered there, their faces drawn with worry and determination. City Hall rose ahead, its stone steps and tall pillars bathed in soft morning light. Reporters and camera crews had already gathered at the base of the steps. Microphones stood ready, and lights aimed toward the podium. A handful of supporters held signs, "Justice for Aisha," and "Police violence, we see you." A hush fell when Aisha, Maria, and Jamal appeared at the entrance. Cameras clicked like raindrops. Aisha climbed the steps, each one echoing under her feet. She reached the podium and paused, looking out at the crowd. Her heart raced, but she steadied her voice. "Good morning," she began, her tone firm but gentle. People leaned forward, waiting. She felt the weight of their eyes, of their hopes and fears. "My name is Aisha Clark. 24 hours ago, I was standing quietly on a busy street when I was slammed to the ground by an officer in uniform." She paused. A murmur rose among the crowd, then quieted as she went on. "I want to thank everyone who has reached out to me, who has shared my story, and who has stood by my side." She spoke of the ache in her cheek, the shock she felt when she hit the pavement, and the question that raced through her mind. "Why did you do this?" Her voice caught for a moment, but she did not stop. She took a breath and continued. "Today, I am here not for revenge, not for hate, but for truth and for justice. I know that most officers serve with honor and care for our community, but when one of them breaks that trust, we all must speak up." She described the missing body cam footage, how the camera shut off at the moment she was hurt. She talked about the bystanders who recorded her fall, risking their own safety to show the world what happened. She thanked them for their courage. She called on the mayor and the police chief to release all footage, to hold the officer accountable, and to ensure transparency in every use of force case. As she spoke, Kamal Harris, the city's civil rights attorney, stepped to her side. He spoke in measured words about the law, about how the department's own policies require full cooperation with investigations. He promised a legal challenge if the footage was not released. He spoke of how power can be used for protection or abuse, and how community oversight could help build trust. Behind them, supporters nodded and held their signs high. A reporter asked from the front row, "Aisha, what do you hope will change after today?" She looked out at the sea of cameras and faces. "I hope that no one else has to feel the way I felt when my face hit the ground. I hope that our police department will remember that its duty is to protect us all, not to punish those who speak up. I hope that transparency becomes the rule, not the exception. And I hope that by speaking my truth, others will feel safe to speak theirs." She ended her statement with a simple sentence, "I will not be silenced." Afterward, reporters crowded around her with microphones and cameras. They asked questions about her injuries, her feelings, her plans. She answered each one with calm honesty, repeating her central points. She refused to be drawn into anger or accusations. Instead, she spoke of community, of healing, and of hope for change. A local television station interviewed her live, and her words echoed across the city's airwaves. Meanwhile, inside City Hall, Mayor Linda Nguyen watched the live feed on a screen in her office. She pressed her hand to her chest as Aisha spoke. After the statement, she called her chief of staff. Within the hour, an official press conference was scheduled in the mayor's office. The police chief, Robert Myers, stood at a podium flanked by the mayor's aide and a sergeant from Internal Affairs. Chief Myers began with a solemn tone. "We have heard Aisha Clarke's powerful words. Our department takes every use of force incident seriously. We are committed to full transparency and fairness." He announced that the department would release all available footage and cooperate fully with the Civilian Review Board. He promised that Officer Dalton would be placed on administrative leave, pending investigation. Outside, the crowd cheered softly. Aisha, Maria, and Jamal exchanged relieved looks. They walked down the steps together, feeling the warmth of the morning sun. Supporters reached out to shake Aisha's hand or pat her shoulder. Many said, "Thank you for speaking up." Others asked how they could help. She told them to sign the petition for civilian oversight and to attend the next city council meeting. She invited them to join a community safety forum she planned to host. That afternoon, Aisha met with local activists in a small conference room at a community center. They spread maps and legal documents on a large table. They discussed future workshops on citizens' rights during police stops, and the group planned to distribute free Know Your Rights cards at local schools and markets. They talked about mental health resources for victims of trauma and about forming a neighborhood patrol to build positive relationships with officers. Aisha listened and guided the conversation, her energy growing as she saw a plan take shape. In her own mind, she replayed the past day's events. She remembered the ache in her face, the steady beat of the paramedics' questions, the hush outside the hospital, the flicker of candle flames at the vigil, and now the buzz of cameras at City Hall, the mayor's statement, the supportive crowd. She felt tired, but she also felt strong. Her voice had been heard, and people had rallied to her side. She knew the road ahead would still be long, but she felt ready. That evening, she returned home and opened her front door to the smell of cooking. Jamal had prepared a simple dinner of rice and vegetables. Maria set the table with candles and soft light. They ate slowly, sharing stories of the day's highs and lows. They laughed at small moments. A neighbor who tried to give Aisha a teddy bear signed "Get well soon." They cried quietly when they spoke of the pain she'd felt. They planned to rest in the morning, but they also knew more work awaited them. When dinner ended, Aisha sat on her sofa and opened her laptop. She drafted an email to the community, summarizing today's events and inviting everyone to the first workshop next week. She uploaded the petition link and attached the mayor's statement. Then she closed her computer and leaned back. Her cheek throbbed in reminder, but she felt a peaceful satisfaction. Late that night, Aisha looked out her window at the quiet street below. The yellow tape at Elm and Fifth had been removed, replaced by fresh pavement and a new rose bush planted in its place. She thought of the white rose left by a stranger in her honor, and of the new rose bush planted by the city in its memory. She closed her eyes and whispered, "Today, I spoke where he was silent." In the stillness, she heard her own words as a promise to herself, and to her community a promise that she would not stop until justice, transparency, and respect were more than hopes, but real truths in everyone's daily life. Officer Dalton arrived back at the precinct just as the sun sank low in the sky. He parked his patrol car in the dim lot and walked through the quiet halls, his boots echoing on the tile floor. No one greeted him. The station felt empty, as if everyone knew something he did not. He passed by a row of cubicles where officers sat with their heads bent over paperwork. Avoiding his eyes, he slipped into the locker room, removed his badge, and hung it on a hook. He stared at his reflection in the mirror, tracing the sharp lines of his uniform against the soft glow of the room's single light bulb. Back at City Hall, news of the mayor's promise to release footage and suspend Dalton had shaken the department. Inside the Internal Affairs office, Sergeant Reed studied reports and witness statements. He had watched Aisha Clarke's statement on the news. Her clear voice demanded answers. That still hung in the air. Reed tapped his pen on the table, considering how to approach Dalton's file. He had no record of body cam malfunctions in that precinct. He frowned at the blank space where the footage should have been. In his mind, he repeated his orders. Find out exactly what happened during those missing seconds. That evening, social media still buzzed about Aisha's speech. Community pages shared her words, praising her calm strength. Local artists painted murals of her face on brick walls downtown. Her eyes determined, her scarf bright. Flyers for Know Your Rights workshops began to appear on bulletin boards in shops and coffee houses. One flyer read, "Stand with Aisha, learn your rights." Another invited people to share stories of police encounters. The city's pulse felt alive. With purpose, Officer Dalton sat alone in his small apartment that night. The walls were bare except for a single photo of him, with his partner at the police academy graduation years ago. He turned on the evening news. Aisha's words played again. He watched her stand tall on the steps of City Hall, her voice unwavering. He felt a tight knot of guilt, denial, and fear coil in his chest. He reached for his phone and typed a message to his union representative. "I need advice. They're going after me." Then he deleted it. He could not admit his doubt, even to himself. Meanwhile, in a cozy community center room, Aisha and her allies met to plan the next steps. The air smelled of coffee and fresh paint. A long table held pens, paper, and half-finished posters. Maria, her friend, sketched ideas for a new mural. Jamal, her brother, passed around snacks and water bottles. Voices rose and fell in hopeful chatter. A local pastor offered to host prayer meetings for peaceful protest. A civil rights lawyer mapped out the timeline for filing a formal complaint. Aisha listened to each idea, nodding and offering thanks. Her face was still bruised, but her eyes shone with resolve. 2 days later, Dalton received a letter at the precinct. It was an official notice of administrative leave. His badge would be held while the review proceeded. He stared at the paper, unreadable. Reporters camped outside his home by morning, snapping photos of his house and interviewing neighbors. He closed his blinds and turned off his phone. The silence felt heavy, as if the whole world had turned its attention on him and then walked away. At the community garden where Aisha had first met her neighbors, volunteers gathered early that Saturday. They planted bright flowers and vegetables in neat rows. Aisha arrived with her scarf, bending to dig small holes alongside older women and young children. She smiled and laughed. Their work creating life in the soil as her words created life. In the city's conscience, someone handed her a trowel, and she placed a seedling into fresh earth, patting the soil gently around its base. The garden symbolized growth, healing, and the possibility of change. Later that afternoon, the Civilian Review Board held its first hearing on the case. The room was packed with community members, reporters, and a handful of police representatives. A judge's gavel tapped twice, and the board convened. They called Officer Dalton to the stand. He sat rigid, his hands clasped tightly in his lap. A clerk read the officer's report. Then the board played the available body cam footage, but the key moment was missing. A hush fell. The lawyer for the city explained that the camera's memory card had malfunctioned. One board member frowned and asked for the maintenance logs. They would need to prove that the malfunction was real and not deliberate. Next, the board called witnesses. A young man who had recorded the video spoke first. He recounted what he saw. Dalton grabbing Aisha's arm, the shove that sent her to the pavement, the moment her cheek hit the concrete. His voice was calm but clear. He described how he feared for Aisha's safety and why he held his phone steady. Then an older woman testified, her hands trembling slightly. She said she had walked her dog that day and came upon the scene. She had rushed to help Aisha and stayed until the ambulance arrived. Each testimony built a picture that clashed with Dalton's report. Finally, Aisha took the stand. She walked forward with Maria by her side, and the lawyer supporting her beside the witness stand. The board's lights glowed softly. Aisha's voice rang out, soft at first but growing firm. She described the fear in her heart as she fell. She spoke of the pain and confusion she felt lying on the cold pavement, exposed in front of strangers. She spoke of the question that haunted her. Why did you do this? She told the board that she had lost trust in an officer sworn to protect her. She asked them to consider her words carefully and to send a message that misuse of power would not be tolerated. When she finished, the board chairman thanked her and adjourned the hearing. Outside, supporters hugged Aisha and clapped her on the back. Journalists jostled for statements. Aisha repeated that she sought truth, not vengeance. She urged the public to stay engaged and to support reforms that would prevent another incident like hers. As she left, the late afternoon sun cast her shadow long on the sidewalk. Officer Dalton watched the live stream of the hearing on his tablet. He sat at the kitchen table of his parents' home, where he had come to escape the media glare. His mother brought him a cup of tea and set it beside him. She said she prayed for him. He nodded but did not look up. He watched as the witnesses spoke. He felt a growing weight in his chest: shame, anger, regret. He wondered if he had gone too far to set things right. That evening, the city buzzed with talk of accountability. City council members prepared new transparency measures. A proposal to require backup cameras on all patrol cars gained momentum. A coalition of community groups and police advocates drafted a code of conduct for officers, to be reviewed by both citizens and law enforcement leaders. Aisha was invited to join the drafting committee. She agreed, hoping that her voice would help shape fair rules. Late at night, Aisha sat at her desk at home. She opened her laptop and read comments from readers of her community newsletter. Many praised her courage. Some wrote that they felt inspired to stand up in their own lives. A few skeptics asked why she had not left the city or let go of the pain. She typed replies, thanking supporters and gently explaining why change mattered. She shut the laptop when her eyes grew heavy. At the precinct, Dalton packed his belongings into a cardboard box. Photos, a coffee mug from the station, a small potted plant from his desk. He paused when he reached the plant, fingers brushing its leaves. He thought of his years of service, the classmates he trained with, the moments of pride when he helped someone in need. He wondered how those moments balanced against what he had done to Aisha. He placed the plant in the box, too, and closed the lid. The next morning brought a letter, an invitation to a peaceful meeting between community leaders and the chief of police. Dalton hesitated but decided to attend. He knew he needed to explain himself, to face the people he had hurt. The meeting was set in a church hall, the same church where Aisha and her supporters had once held a vigil. He arrived early, his uniform replaced by a plain shirt and tie. Faces turned toward him. Some welcomed him, others glowered. His heart pounded. Aisha stood at the front, her cheek still showing a faint mark. She wore her scarf again. She nodded at him. He walked forward, each step feeling heavy. He reached the microphone and cleared his throat. His voice cracked as he began to speak. He said he was sorry for what happened, that he was ashamed of his actions, that he had failed to serve with honor. The room was silent when he finished. A few people nodded, some stayed still. A friend of Aisha's stepped forward and offered him a handshake, a small gesture of peace. In that moment, the hall felt charged with tension and hope. Aisha and Dalton stood on the same floor, both humbled by the past days. The meeting continued with honest talk, questions, answers, hard truths. A community began to heal, not by forgetting, but by facing what had gone wrong. And in that shared space, real change found its first breath. A week passed since Officer Dalton's apology at the church hall. The city felt quieter now, but its heart still beat with energy and hope. Aisha woke early that Monday, her cheek nearly healed, leaving only a faint purple shadow under her eye. Sunlight streamed through her window as she stretched and yawned. She thought of the meeting that day, the first session of the new Civilian Oversight Committee. She would help lead. She dressed in a soft blue dress and wrapped her bright scarf around her shoulders. She felt a mix of nerves and excitement. This committee could shape the future of police and community relations. In Springfield, at the community center, a small group had gathered. Round a long table sat lawyers, activists, a few officers, and city officials. Aisha took her seat between Maria and a longtime neighbor, Mr. Jackson. He smiled and gave her a reassuring nod. The room smelled faintly of coffee and fresh paint. On the wall behind them hung the mural painted in her honor, her determined face, her strong eyes, her bright scarf fluttering in a gentle breeze. The committee chair, a retired judge named Ms. Alvarez, called the meeting to order. She thanked everyone for volunteering and reminded them of their mission to review police policies, recommend reforms, and build trust. She handed out folders with draft guidelines. Aisha opened hers and read phrases like transparency, fair use of force, and community engagement. She felt the words resonate in her chest. She looked at Dalton, who sat near the end of the table. He wore plain clothes and his face was open, as if he, too, wanted to help. For 2 hours, they discussed camera policies, how to keep body cam footage secure, and when to release it to the public. Aisha spoke up calmly. We need clear rules so everyone knows what to expect. If the camera fails, there must be an independent review right away. Officers on the committee agreed, saying faults can happen but must be checked quickly. Lawyers added that lost footage could harm trust. The meeting felt like real work, not just talk. By the end, they had agreed on a draft policy to present to the city council. Later that afternoon, Aisha walked to the corner of Elm and Fifth. The yellow tape was gone. and the white rose bush had grown bright green leaves and small buds of red. She knelt and touched a single rose petal. She closed her eyes and remembered the pain she had felt there. Now, the same spot held life. A gentle breeze carried the distant sounds of children playing and cars passing. She smiled softly and whispered, "We will keep growing." She stood and walked away, her step steady and sure. Over the next month, the committee's work moved forward. Aisha spent many evenings drafting reports, meeting with experts, and listening to neighbors' stories. Some told of small kindnesses from officers who stopped to help change a tire. Others spoke of fear when stopped at night for no clear reason. Aisha recorded every voice equally, believing that healing came from listening. She felt tired some days, but she remembered why she did it. It was more than her own story now. It was the story of her whole community. At home, Jamal cooked dinner while Maria helped Aisha type emails. They laughed over small jokes. Maria teased that Aisha spent more time at City Hall than at home. Jamal rolled his eyes but smiled. Their closeness gave Aisha strength. She thought often of her family's love. She thought of the first day she stepped to the podium, bruised and afraid, and the moment she found her voice. Now her voice had found others. On a warm Saturday, the city council held a special session to review the committee's recommendations. The council chamber was full. Reporters filled the balcony. Neighbors lined the walls. Aisha sat beside Ms. Alvarez and Dalton, in a front row of seats. When her name was called, she rose and walked to the podium. She spoke with calm confidence. "These policies are not just words on paper. They are steps to rebuild trust between our police and our community. We owe it to each other to be honest, fair, and open." She presented the draft, explaining each point simply. The council members asked questions, and Aisha answered patiently. When she finished, the chamber erupted in soft applause. Later that afternoon, a small celebration was held at the community garden. Volunteers served lemonade and pastries. Aisha cut a ribbon around a new sign, Springfield Community Garden and Peace Park. The garden's flowers bloomed in reds, pinks, yellows, testaments of healing. Aisha felt tears in her eyes as she thanked everyone. She thought of the day her meeting began with bruises and fear. Now she stood surrounded by life, friendship, and new beginnings. She hugged Maria and Jamal, then hugged Dalton too. He looked humbled and relieved. They shared a quiet moment of forgiveness. That evening, Aisha sat on her porch swing. The night air cool and soft. She rocked gently, watching fireflies blink in the yard. She thought back on her journey, the shove that sent her face to the pavement, the anger and fear, the strength she found to speak out, and the changes that had rippled through her city. She thought of the rose bush at Elm and Fifth, and how it bloomed after being planted in soil that once held her hurt. She thought of faces she had met, the paramedic who treated her kindly, the neighbors who stood beside her, the judge who guided the committee, and the officers who joined in building trust. She believed in the power of a single voice. She believed every person deserved respect. She believed that change could come when people listened and worked together. She believed that even after pain, growth was possible. She closed her eyes and let the night breeze carry her hopes for a safer city, for honest officers, for citizens who knew their rights and felt their power. She whispered a promise to herself and to everyone who watched her fall and rise. "I will keep speaking. I will keep growing. I will keep hope alive." When she went inside, she found a note slipped under her door. It had no name, only a simple message in black ink. "Thank you for your courage. We stand with you." She folded the paper gently and placed it in her journal, next to the photograph of the rose bush. She turned off the light and crawled into bed, her heart full. As she drifted toward sleep, she felt a soft peace, knowing that her voice had sparked change, and that the city's path forward would be brighter for everyone.